Welcome, everyone. Really glad to see so many people coming to this quite niche webinar. So it's kind of niche area, certificates of sponsorship. I think it'll appeal to kind of 0.001% of the population, but those who are involved in the sponsorship business, it should be helpful to you. Although it's quite niche, it can actually branch into quite a few different directions, like minimum salary, how much you have to pay your workers, or compliance. How do you make sure you keep your license, don't lose it, or visa? So part of the reason we've kept it Q&A is so that I can go through some of the key areas that I think are important that you need to know about. Then there'll be a good portion allocated at the end to deal with your specific questions. But as Carissa said, if you could either put those in chat during the call or save them at the end, and I think we're letting you speak. Okay, so just to start with, the purpose of the webinar, well, yeah, is to get a thorough understanding of certificates of sponsorship, why they're important, and really understand the key role that they play within this sponsorship process. In terms of the agenda, well, we'll start with the basics of what is a certificate of sponsorship. I will, from now on, just try and refer to that as a COS, just for ease of reference. We'll look at how to issue and assign a COS, and then we'll have a look at some of the compliance implications, some of the relevant compliance matters that you need to be aware of to do with COS is. And then we'll have a look at some of the common issues that we're seeing crop up regularly as part of our work. So, so some of you, I do recognize some of your names and one person's face. Hi, Niru. But I also, there's a lot of new people to the call. So just to clarify, a lot of the work that we do in the immigration team is helping businesses, organizations around sponsorship and sponsorship of specific workers. So when we're looking at the kind of common issues and troubleshooting, it's really going through some of the kind of the key mistakes really that people are making and how to get around them. And then at the end, there should be plenty of time for the Q&A and practical tips. Okay, I also appreciate, by the way, that there will be different sort of levels of knowledge coming into this call. There'll be some people who know a lot, and then some people will barely know what a cause is. So I'm trying to kind of find a middle ground and then go take people a little bit deeper as we go. So what is a cause? Well, it's a digital certificate provided by an employer to your skilled worker. So it's not a physical thing, it's something that is allocated to you by the Home Office. And then through your portal, known as the sponsor management system, you can then assign it, so link it to your worker. Important to note that the license is the thing that allows you to get into the business of sponsoring workers. But if you have a license, that doesn't necessarily mean you're in a position to straight away sponsor a worker. You need a cause for each person you want to sponsor. So just be clear that there's the license, that is a gateway into sponsoring people, but then each person sponsor needs a cause. So what's the purpose of a cause? Well, ultimately, your worker that you want to work for you, your overseas worker, they need that cause information to input into their visa application. So it's a really key part of this skilled worker route, and it acts as a proof that you are offering genuine employment that meets all Home Office requirements. Some of you who are already deeply involved in the business of sponsorship may be aware that the Home Office is becoming kind of obstructive, making life difficult when it comes to requesting certificates of sponsorship. They're now often requesting what they call further information. And for some sectors like care sector, it's really becoming a big barrier. They're asking for a whole load of information. So there are kind of strict requirements about what the Home Office want to, the kind of evidence and information they need before they will allow you to sponsor an individual. The general principle behind issuing a cause, well, it's back to this. If anyone came to the sponsor license compliance webinar, I talked about how the Home Office see having a license as this really big responsibility, and you're a trusted sponsor. And one of the reasons they have these very tough rules is because they are devolving a lot of trust in you to kind of keep tabs on whoever you're sponsoring. So, just key bit of understanding. This is possibly one of the top things to remember if you're not familiar with this process. There are two types of cause, okay, and they are different in how you process them, and they have slightly different rules, okay. So you will either need a defined cause, or an undefined cause. So defined cause, look at that first. That is for a worker applying from outside the UK. So if the person that you want to sponsor is outside the UK, straight away you've got to think it's a defined cause I need. Now, with a defined cause, you apply for them on an as needed basis. Okay. So you decide you want to sponsor someone, apply for the defined cause, and then you can assign it to that individual. And that's in contrast with the undefined cause that I'll come to in a second. I've done a screenshot, it's a bit small, but in terms of navigating the sponsor management system, which is the portal through which you do what you need to do for your sponsor license, there is a separate section for defined cause. You can see it on the left-hand side if you squint. And everything you need to do is done within that section, unlike with an undefined cause. For an undefined cause, it's for workers who are already in the UK. So, and it'll be a situation where the person is on a different visa and you want to switch them over onto a sponsored visa with you. So they could be a student on a student visa, on a graduate route visa. They could be on a spouse visa. The only thing they can't be on is a visitor. So never try and sponsor someone who's here as a visitor, because that will simply get refused. Okay, and with an undefined cause, you get something called an annual allocation of cause. So it's this kind of strange language they use. Those of you who have a license may know that you are able to apply for an annual allocation when you apply for your license, and you're then given a given allocation of cause. If you use your cause allocation up through the year, so let's say you've been given two undefined cause, and you have something called a cause year, which runs from when your license was granted. So let's say your license is granted in 1st of January 2020. Your cause year runs from 1st of January 2020 to 31st of December. Now, if within that what's called cause year, you use up your allocation of cause, so you use in this example 2 cause, you'll automatically be given another 2 for your next allocation. However, in practice, what often happens, people don't have the cause that they need for whatever reason, and you can apply for what's called an in-year increase in your annual allocation. Total mouthful, but you're basically just applying for undefined cause, but they call it, they refer to it as an allocation. So yeah, key distinction here is external hires, defined cause, internal hires, undefined cause. And if you use the wrong cause, that can be a grounds to revoke your whole license and have that taken away from you. So it's this kind of stupid technical point, but it is what it is. Okay, so in terms of the process of assigning a cause, well, this is done through the sponsor management system, which looks a bit like that screenshot when you log in. So there's a cause form to complete, and you have to enter certain information like, apart from the worker's details, the SOC code. So every job has a code or fits into a code. You need to enter the most appropriate code. There's a minimum salary that I'll come back to. So you have to state the salary, job role, a summary job description. That is just job duties. Don't start putting in what is required for the role, as in, the person's spec. It is more just duties. And you have to put down when their start date of sponsored employment will be and their end date. And that will define the duration of sponsorship. So if you want to sponsor someone for 2 years, you'd be putting a start date with an end date of plus 2 years. Just a little tip, a random tip. If you are sponsoring someone as a new entrant, so that's someone who is under 26, is switching from a student visa or a graduate route visa, they're the main ones. You can pay the worker much less if they are falling under this definition of a new entrant. And there's a box to tick to say they're new entrant, but you need to explain why they're a new entrant within the job description. Otherwise, the Home Office can reject your request. So because being a new entrant could be age, or it could be student visa, or it could be graduate route visa, just need to explain that at the bottom of the job description. So it seems a bit odd. You'll have like job duties for a carer, care worker, that whatever that is. Then you'll just say individual qualifies as a new entrant as he's currently on a graduate route visa. And just make sure that once you've assigned your cause, you are then printing it off. So there is a way of printing your cause. If you go into view cause and then print it, send that to the worker so they've got all the information they need to input into their visa application. So common errors when issuing a cause, you've got the wrong SOC code. So you need to make sure that you are choosing the most appropriate code for the job that they're doing. Now, often in reality, so some jobs will just neatly fit a code, like a care worker will normally neatly fit the SOC code of a care worker. But there's quite often office roles where someone's doing a bit of marketing, maybe doing a bit of office administration. You've really just got to plump for the most appropriate SOC code. And I think there's a link somewhere else on the slides about where to look for those codes. Other common errors, incorrect salary. Make sure you're paying the minimum salary threshold. We'll come to that again. Ticking the wrong box. Just if you're not sure what you're ticking, check what it is. For example, there's a tick box for salary list. That's a list of which jobs are recognized as being in short supply. If your job's not on that salary list, don't tick the box. Failure to tick to certify maintenance is a common one. This is a strange language. What does certify maintenance mean? There's just a tick box. If you tick that box, the worker does not have to show any personal savings. If you don't tick that box, especially if they're applying from outside the UK, the worker will have to show around about £1,300 in personal savings held for a month, more if they're bringing dependents. So I just say always tick that box. Okay, so just moving on to some of the job requirements, the eligibility criteria, and first of all, the job role requirements. So to be capable of sponsorship, the job must be on at what's called RQF level 3 or above. So all jobs are given a skill level according to whoever sets these skill levels. And basically the job has to be on that appendix skilled occupations. So that it used to be RQF level 5. It has been lowered to allow many more jobs to be sponsored. But if the job's not capable of being sponsored, it's a complete dead end. So just an example, if you run a restaurant business, you can sponsor a floor manager, you can sponsor a chef, you cannot sponsor a waiter or bar staff. Salary thresholds, I've touched on this a few times. This is probably the biggest cause of visa refusal. And it's complicated, even though I've been doing this for a long time, it still gets me. You need to make sure you're paying the appropriate salary threshold. Now, this could be probably half of a webinar in its own right to go through all the different permutations of the minimum salary threshold. So I can only kind of give it a brief overview just now, but if you've got specific questions, happy to answer. Unfortunately, the general minimum salary threshold has gone up to 38,700. Now, there are exceptions to that. Most notably, the new entrant. If someone's a new entrant, so they're, as I said, they're under 26 or they're on a student visa or a graduate route visa, that 38,700 drops to 30,960. However, you still, even if it's new entrant, you still have to pay £15.88 per hour. Now, health and care roles are generally exempt from these limits. So if you're in the care sector, then basically this doesn't apply to you at all. And there's a much lower threshold applies, which I can come to in a bit. Okay, and occupation codes and their importance in the cause application. Yeah, I've already mentioned that. Okay, so the other key eligibility criteria is what they call the genuine vacancy test. Now, the Home Office want to know that the role is genuine and that it's not a means of simply bringing someone in random into the UK by any means. There used to be something called a resident labour market test, which is a very strict advertising procedure where you'd have to advertise on job search and then one other place for 28 days. They've got rid of that strict requirement, but you still need to be able to justify if asked how this person's come on your radar, because the Home Office really don't like this idea of just seemingly random people making an application. If you're advertising for the role, just make sure you're keeping copies of the adverts, keep a copy of who's applied, keep a copy of applications, keep a copy of CVs, ideally keep a copy of interview records. I'm not saying that you have to volunteer this information or this evidence to the Home Office, but if you're audited, they will definitely zoom in on this kind of information. In terms of what's put here as the worker requirements, well, that's really the visa requirements. I would say that when it comes to the skilled worker visa application, 95% of the battle is getting this cause assigned by you. The other bits are relatively straightforward. So I'd say the big one for some people will just be making sure they can meet the English language requirement. So if they're from a majority recognized English speaking country, they'll automatically meet that. But that list of what's automatically recognized as a majority English speaking country is smaller than you might think. So lots of countries in Africa where, as far as I can tell, people speak very good English as a first language, it's actually not recognized as being majority English speaking, includes South Africa. If they're not from a majority, one of those countries that is recognized, they could have a degree taught in the UK. If it's a degree taught outside the UK, they can rely on that, but only if it's verified by a body called ECTIS as being taught in English and at degree level or above. For everyone else, they'll have to take a prescribed English language test. It has to be the exact right test. It's called a secure English language test from an approved test centre. So English language is the big one. If you've ticked that box about certifying maintenance, you don't have to, well, the worker doesn't have to worry about personal savings. Applicants from some countries will need a TB test, so you need to check whether essentially TB is a problem in that country, so they need a TB test. Some roles like care worker, health roles will need a criminal records check. That tends to pretty much be it. It says here necessary qualifications. I wouldn't normally put forward qualifications, but the Home Office could request this. And if they do, then you need to be ready to show how you're suitable for the role. So just moving on to some cause-related costs. So the sponsorship does come at a cost, significant cost. The cost per cause is a flat fee of 239. So that's each time you assign a cause. You don't pay that when you apply for a cause, only when you assign it. And then the big one is this immigration skills charge. Now that will either be 364 or £1,000 per year that you sponsor someone. So it's per person per year. So if just for the simplicity of maths, sorry, I should say that the 364 is if your class is a small company. Small company, you have to be two of the following three criteria. Let me get this right. Under 11.2 million turnover, that's one of the criteria. Second criteria is under 50 employees. And the third criteria is a balance sheet of less than 5.2 million, which I think is having assets of less than 5.2 million. If you're ticking two of those boxes, you're a small company. and you pay that 364 per year. If you're not a small company or not a charity, then it's £1,000 a year. So if you want to sponsor someone for 5 years, let's say you're a large company, you would pay upfront 5 times 1,000, so £5,000 when you assign the cause. But if you just sponsored them for 1 year, you just pay that £1,000. Oh, and plus that 239. Okay, so it is a significant outlay. So in terms of financial planning for assigning a cause, well, you just obviously need to make sure that you're on top of the costs associated with sponsorship. It's worth just highlighting that if you are sponsoring a student, so someone who's on a student visa, they exempt you from that immigration skills charge. So I would say kind of get the students if you can. So maybe this is kind of straying into business advice, not immigration advice, but if you can get a student to work for you part-time, let them prove themselves whilst they're studying. So they're allowed to work 20 hours a week during term time, full-time outside of term time. And then once they've completed their degree, you could then sponsor them and not have to pay that hefty immigration skills charge. So top tip. Yeah, then the other thing is if you're sponsoring from overseas, again, this is business advice, not legal advice. You've got the issue of people coming to a new country, they don't know anything about culture, potential for culture shock. Whereas if you've got sponsoring people who are already in the UK, then you know they know what it's all about. They know how miserable it can be in the winter. And you can pass on some of your sponsorship fees to the worker if you're so inclined. You can pass on the cause fee, but you cannot. The one thing you cannot do is pass on the immigration skills charge. That's explicitly prohibited. Just last thing on the slide, a lot of people, when you assign a cause, you have to select the relevant subcategory. And I've just flagged this because everyone gets this wrong. If someone's a student, you have, so let me get this start again. Where people are getting this wrong is if someone's on a graduate route visa, that's the visa you get after you finish your studies. It's a 2-year visa. And if you're sponsoring someone on a graduate route visa, do not choose that graduate in tier 4/student route. You have to choose skilled worker switching immigration category ISC liable. That's the one that's highlighted, skilled worker graduate in tier 4 student route is only for people on a student visa. That is a particularly niche point there. Okay. Oh, Carissa, you're on mute.
Sorry to interrupt. I just noticed there's a question very specifically linked to that last slide. So I thought maybe we touch on it
Sure.
while we go in. So do you mind just going back to the other slide? So the question is on this section, which I believe is referring to the screenshot. Which one do we select if we are sponsoring a graduate on PSW visa? Is the graduate tier 4/student switching to skilled worker or another?
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say. It's in a kind of labored way, is don't choose if someone's on a graduate route visa, which used to be called the post-study work visa. Just to be clear, that is not a student visa. You would choose the top one, immigration skilled worker switching immigration category ISC liable. It's only if they're on a student visa, sorry, that you would choose the graduate in tier 4 student route. It's just very confusingly worded, that whole thing. But the problem is if you choose the one that's highlighted when you're not meant to, you're exempt from the immigration skills charge when you shouldn't be. And therefore, you've basically not paid what you're meant to pay and the visa can be refused. So again, it's a classic, don't tick the wrong thing, or there's kind of outsized, harsh consequences. So hopefully that's answered that. I shall move on. Okay, thanks, Carissa. Right, maintaining compliance. So this is going to just wander a little bit into the area of compliance, which is really a key area. So it's particularly compliance as it relates to sponsoring workers. So just to flag your record keeping obligations, this is a really big thing if you're ever audited. The Home Office expects you to have up-to-date contact details for anyone you're sponsoring. And what that means is you have to be checking fairly regularly any sponsored workers' contact details, so home address, telephone number, email. I would recommend that you have a reminder diarized to check at least every 6 months. So it could just be as simple as, if you're using Outlook, just have a thing that, what's it called? Kind of on repeat to flag every 6 months. So the idea behind that is the Home Office is not, yes, they do want to see contact details, but they want to know you've got a process in place. So it's, and literally just to tick this box would just be to point to your reminder. That would show you've got a process in place. And make sure you don't overwrite the old details, because you have to be able to hand over a full record of that person's contact details. The idea is that if someone goes AWOL, you can then hand over wherever they've lived. I don't know why anyone would go back to an old house, but there you go. Reporting duties. I think someone's asked a question about this as well. So you have certain what are called reporting duties, which relate to the sponsorship of individuals. So, for example, if there's a change in role or a change in salary, it needs to be reported to the Home Office. But there are also reporting requirements such as if a worker doesn't turn up for the first day of sponsored work, they have to be reported. If someone's absent without leave for 10 days in a row, they have to be reported. If someone's on reduced or on no pay for 4 weeks, they have to be reported. And whenever this reporting duty arises, it's a 10 working day deadline to report that. And there is a section in the sponsor guidance about when all the different times you have to report. But you do need to keep on top of that. And it's good, the Home Office will like to, if you can show that you're reporting stuff, they'll kind of think, well, yeah, you're on top of that. If there's just nothing getting reported ever, it looks a bit potentially odd or a bit suspicious to them. Okay, so risks of non-compliance. Well, again, I'm afraid it's all the scary stuff of suspension, having your license suspended, having your license revoked. If you get revoked, at worst, which is that getting revoked is like the worst outcome, but you would have all your sponsored workers would have their visas cut short to 60 days. So it is something you need to keep on top of. Strongly recommend having internal audits, and we can help with external audits, would you wish. Okay, so nearly finished my bit. So common issues and pitfalls. Okay, so incorrect SOC codes leading to visa refusal. So again, make sure you've got the as best the most accurate code that you can. What you should never do. So different codes have different minimum salaries associated with them. So a chef will be some amount, a lower end of the spectrum for what's capable of sponsorship. I think that would be 30,000. Whereas if it's a managing director, that's going to be 60,000. Now, what you mustn't do is just choose a code that has a more attractive minimum salary. It has to be accurate for what the job is. If you're audited, they'll interview your sponsored worker and ask them exactly what they do during the day. Other pitfalls, well, failing to monitor visa expiry dates. Even for sponsored workers, you have to be monitoring their visa expiry dates, setting reminders. So I always say, this is essential again. You have to be putting the date of the expiry in your diarising system and a 3-month reminder before the visa expires. Another challenge is assigning cause for roles that don't meet the salary threshold or skill level. I think I've covered that. Okay, so just how you can address these issues, well, just double check the details before you sign a cause. If you make a mistake, you have to leave a sponsor note. And if it's a minor mistake, you can get away with leaving a sponsor note. If you've made a more significant mistake, such as a wrong SOC code, um, job title, you actually need a new cause. So don't rush assigning the cause. Sorry if that sounds patronizing, but you really do need to take your time copying across the worker's details from the passport. And then, yeah, using the SMS to manage your cause assignments and logging into the SMS once a month. So the Home Office, I think it was 2 years ago now, they sent emails to lots of sponsors to say, we've noticed you've not logged into your sponsor management system for X months. So they actually monitor how often you're logging in. So I mean, in reality, if you're just sponsoring one or two people, it's not kind of playing this central role in your HR life. So you may not naturally be logging in too often, but I'd say always log in once a month, even if it's just to log in and then log out again. Excuse me. Okay, so that is going into the cause in a bit more detail there. Q&A time. I can see there's a few questions.
Should we start with the ones that were submitted online before the webinar?
Yeah, sure. Oh, is that the next
It is the
screen,
next
is
slide,
it?
sorry. Apologies for that.
That's okay. Okay, so the first, this is just a couple of questions that some organized people submitted in advance. So what is the minimum salary requirement for a certificate of sponsorship? Well, that's quite a hard, there's no single answer to that. Like I said, the general minimum salary requirement is 38,700, but if they're a new entrant, it's 30,960, but always £15.88. It's different rules for health and care workers at, I think it's 23,200. If a sponsored employee is absent due to illness for a maximum of 3 days and is unable to meet their weekly hours, should we inform the head office? I don't know if you mean home office. I think you probably mean home office there. No, you don't need to inform the home office if someone is just on sick leave. Where there can be a duty to report if someone's on no pay or reduced pay for 4 weeks in a calendar year. Okay, so it would have to be hitting 4 weeks, and then you would have to report them to the Home Office. And you actually normally have to stop sponsoring them as well. However, there are some important exemptions, such as maternity leave, paternity leave, that kind of stuff. And there is a sort of compassionate, exceptional circumstances. So if there are sort of exceptional, compassionate reasons why someone's been on reduced or low pay for over 4 weeks, you might be able to argue your case. Um, so please clarify the rules on sponsoring newly qualified graduates and minimum pay and sponsorship length. The minimum wage for shortlisted staff is high for people with no experience. So I want to know if there are ways of paying them the same as UK residents. So I have talked about newly qualified graduates. Well, a newly qualified graduate can apply for this graduate route, which is not sponsored. So that's a 2-year visa. That's always the best option, I'd say, for them. But if I'm advising the individual rather than the business. But you're talking about sponsoring a new graduate. Well, they would qualify as a new entrant, if assuming you're talking about a UK graduate. Minimum pay, as I've said, is 30,960, £15.88 per hour. But importantly, you can only sponsor them for 4 years as a new entrant. It's actually 4 years minus any time spent on the graduate route. So if someone's on the graduate route, they've had 2 years on the graduate route, you could only sponsor them for 2 years as a new entrant because it's 4 years minus time spent on the graduate route. If someone's switching from student to skilled worker, then you could sponsor them for 4 years as a new entrant. I mean, I don't really know of any other ways around this minimum salary issue, I'm afraid. we have been advising people for a while, try and get on, if you can get people under the new entrant route, that's really your best bet. I think it's just personal opinion. I don't think the minimum salary thresholds are going to go up for a long time. So they hadn't been put up for quite a while before. So, if you can sponsor someone for 2 or 4 years as a new entrant, maybe in 4 years' time, that 38,700 isn't going to seem quite as high as it does now. Okay. Carissa, were you going to go
Yeah, I
through
can
some
read
of
them
the?
out.
Yeah, thanks.
I think you sort of already answered this one, but Raja's asking for an overview on post-appointment obligations for sponsored individuals. Sorry, of sponsored individuals.
Yeah, so again, it's back to those reporting requirements. You really need to look through the list of when you have to report. But like I say, if there's a change of job title, you'd report that title, but you can only do that if it's still within the same code. Okay? If someone's moving in, this is a really important point actually. If you've sponsored someone as a kind of office administrator, let's say, and they're under that, whatever that code is, but then you want them to get more into, they've moved into more of a marketing role, that will be a different code. You can't just push them into that new role. You would need to first assign them a new cause, and they need to apply for a new visa. So that is a really annoying thing about this sponsorship system. It's quite inflexible if someone's moving role. Same if you're in the care sector, if someone's um, here as a kind of normal care worker, but they want to move into a more supervisory role, that would be a senior care worker. Unfortunately, that's a different code. So you need a new sponsorship, new visa application. If someone moves address, you don't need to tell the Home Office. So if the individual moves home address, don't have to tell the Home Office, but you need to keep a record of their addresses. Actually, I've said that already. Don't need to go on about that again. I would like. Oh, sorry, Chris.
Oh, it's okay. The next question here is from Sane. Is there a headcount limit for a license that the license holder can sponsor at most?
So I think this is asking like, what's the maximum people you can sponsor? There is no maximum. However, you will put yourself on the Home Office radar the more you sponsor. That's kind of all I can really say. There's no black and white guidance. But if the numbers that you're sponsoring is becoming high in proportion to your total employees, that is going to be more of a red flag. But to answer your question, there is no limit as such. But I would say that if you're going with higher numbers, if you're in care, it's different because the CQC or local authority can have concerns about your viability if you were to lose your license. But I think for others, you can kind of sponsor what you want, but just if you are sponsoring higher numbers, you just have to be absolutely on top of the sponsor license compliance because your business can go bust if you lose your license.
Okay, the next question here is from Nero. Our annual quota of cause has expired. We did not sponsor anybody. Now we wish to sponsor one employee. How can we do that? How long does it take? And is there any priority service? And if yes, how to access it?
Okay, good question. So in this situation, you don't have any cause available, and I'm assuming you mean undefined cause, because if it's a defined cause, you always have to make an application whenever you need one. But assuming it's undefined cause, you would have to navigate to your sponsor management system, navigate to the bit where you apply for an in-year increase in your annual allocation. That is step one. Problem is that can take up to 18 weeks to come through. So you would then want to, as Neeru says, apply for the priority service, which there is a form to complete. I daren't risk navigating to that website just now in case I mess up my slides, but if you search for priority UKVI priority change of circumstances, it'll bring up a form. You have to complete that form, send it off at exactly 9 a.m. to have a chance of getting priority service. And if you get that, you should get your cause within a week. Okay.
Okay, the next question here is from Christina. When completing the sponsorship application, it asks how many undefined cause you will need. Is the allocation based on the individuals requiring a visa in that moment of time? Or could you ask for a higher allocation on the basis that you foresee needing to hire more people in the future?
Okay, another good question. So this is for people who are applying for the license. So this will not apply to many people on this call who already have a license. When you're applying for your allocation, when applying for a license, it's for certificates you intend to assign undefined cause within the next 12 months. So the most sort of surefire way of getting a cause allocation is to name individuals, especially if they're working for you is good, but even if they're not. So you'd want to say, we need 4 cause for the following individuals, 3 of which are already working for us, 1 that we're going to bring from abroad, and then you list their personal details on that cover letter. And if you name individuals, you should get the allocation. You can also speculatively ask for some. You may or may not get them. I don't think there's any too much harm to be had in asking for them on a more speculative basis, but don't go crazy.
Okay, great. The next question is from Aaron. Do we need to report if someone moves over to a different visa type?
Yeah, because we've skipped the one about PSW, because we've definitely done that one, haven't we?
Mhm.
So question is, do we need to report if someone moves over from a skilled worker to a global talent visa? Yes, 100%. So if someone is being sponsored, but they
So,
then finds, sorry.
sorry, this one is just a different visa type, so it's not specific. But either way, I'm sure it's the same.
Oh, what am I? Am
You,
I looking at one that says, "Do
if,
we need to report if someone moves over from a skilled worker to a global talent visa?" Or is that? Am I reading the wrong thing?
it may have been amended. It was edited. Okay, tricked me.
Okay, so we're
Okay.
looking at this one. Do we need to report if someone moves over from a skilled worker to a global talent visa? Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it would apply if someone's moving to any other visa category. Yes, you do need to report that. So you'd log on to SMS, say you're no longer sponsoring them, and you have to do that within 10 days of them switching onto a new route. So definite, yes, you have to do that within 10 days.
Okay. The next question is from Rahila. How long is a business sponsor license valid for?
It's for 4 years, but they've automatically extended most licenses, I think, to 10 years. So I think it's officially still 4 years, but it's likely to be extended to 10.
Great. Next question here is from Christina. When assigning a cause, I believe there is a question about expected duration or end date. How long do you assign for if you have no anticipated end date for the employee?
So, yeah, good question. And again, a common area of confusion. The end date is how long you want to sponsor them for initially. That doesn't necessarily mean they have to actually stop employment then, but the start and end date will define their duration of sponsorship and therefore how much money is paid. So let's say you want to sponsor them for 2 years and you're assigning the cause today, 2 years, you put a start date of 26 September 2024 and you'd put an end date of 25 September 2026. And that would mean you're sponsoring for 2 years. And then, assuming things work out, you can then sponsor them for a further however long. So that the start date and end date define the duration of sponsorship. But that doesn't mean that's not the same as when they have to actually necessarily terminate their employment.
Great. And the next question is from Elsa. Please, can you confirm if you need to put a note on the SMS for each worker when the national minimum wages increase? I've had conflicting advice.
I don't think you do. So I don't. Yeah. I think actually they got rid of the requirement to report an increase in salary. Okay. Um, Decreases in salary 100% have to be reported, and then it's only permissible if it's still within the salary threshold. Increases, no, you don't have to. There's no requirement to report an increase in salary.
Great. Next question here from Charlotte. Are there any further considerations to the quote, when you can be paid less quote,
Ah,
page on the Gov website where someone can be paid £30,960?
oh, another good question. It's actually just reminded me that there is another way of paying people less. So thank you for the question. So the only other way that I can think of, apart from health and care roles, which are their own separate system, or separate threshold, which is much less. If we're talking about sort of non-health and care roles, if someone's already on a skilled worker visa and they had that before the 4th of April, 2024, they are falling under something called transitional arrangements, and they will only need to be paid 29,000. So I guess that's another thing, another top tip is kind of look out for students who can be new entrants, or if someone who's sponsored by another employer but they want to join you, they would fall under transitional arrangements, 29,000 or higher if it's a higher SOC code. But rather than 38,700, which is like the kind of standard top end, it could be 29,000. I hope that answers the question. Let me know if not.
Right. The next question is from Joe. What is the correct migrant activity type to use for logging maternity leave?
I'm not sure actually off the top of my head. I'd have to have a look around on that. So, I mean, you go into report migrant activity, and yeah, sorry, Joe, I'm not sure off the top of my head. I'd have to have a look with you to see what the options are there.
And the next question is from Aaron. When explaining the implications of reporting the 4 weeks of reduced pay due to sickness to the employee, should we highlight that sponsorship may have to stop?
Yeah, I think that's fair enough because that is the situation. So yeah, I don't have a problem with you explaining that to the worker.
Great.
I don't know why my
Um,
slides have turned black, but there we are.
that's okay. The next question is from, oh, they're back. Okay. Rahila, I have heard of a global talent visa sponsorship for some graduates. Would you know anything about this and how would it compare to a skilled worker route?
Yeah, I mean, global talent visa route is probably the best visa route out there. It's for these kind of so-called highly talented individuals in certain areas, such as arts, science, um, tech, stuff like that. But it's either for people who are kind of leaders in their field or what's called emerging talent. That is not a sponsored role, so that's the individual's business. If they can get that, good for them. But it's not for most people, I would say. You have to really be kind of leading the way in whatever you do.
All right, the next question is from Victoria. A social worker needs to do their ASYE year as a newly qualified social worker, and then they move on to, say, a level 1, and within a couple of years, maybe a level 2. Does this mean they need 3 cause and 3 visa applications?
I Yeah, I don't think so because I'm assuming, but don't know for sure, but I'm assuming there's just one code for social workers, but that there's different bands within the social worker field. And so because it's not um, changing code, I think you'd be fine just to stick with the same cause. Probably good practice to, it might be obligatory, I'm not sure, but I think it'd be good to err on the side of caution and just report a change in band. So I know you said you don't need to report an increase in salary, but I think because it's linked to kind of the banding system, you might be advised to report a change in band. Yeah.
All right, next question is from Elsa. Would you report a pre-reg nurse 2231 qualifying with NMC, hoping no
Hmm.
cause change is required as still in the same SOC?
Yeah, I think that's the same thing, Ilse, that because it's in the same um, SOC code, I don't think you'd need a new cause. Again, it might be prudent just to report the change in status. if they've qualified, just report that to the Home Office. I think it's better to err on the side of caution. Report stuff to the Home Office. It kind of shows you're on top of stuff. If you didn't really need to, I don't think there's anything to lose by doing so.
Right. And Nero is just asking here, I missed the name of the website from where I can get the form to be filled to request the increase in annual allotment of cause on priority, the priority form that it
Okay,
mentioned.
I'll just quickly show you. Priority change. There we go. Nothing there. Okay, so you'd go to this. I can copy this, can't I? Put it in the chat. Basically, for the priority change in circumstances, you would go to this page, and there is a form where it says worker and temporary priority request form. Click on here. Oh, it downloads a Word document, so I'm not going to go through that now, but it generates a form that you need to complete. So I'm putting that in the chat box now. Okay.
Okay, we've just had one more question come in. This is probably going to be the last one. If there's anything after it's pressing, feel free to get in touch with us. But this question is from Mahila. I am looking to sponsor a current employee who is on a PSW visa and potentially another one who has recently graduated. Should I apply for two cause? Also, will it be more beneficial for the business to sponsor the new graduate as a new entrant or them to apply for their 2-year PSW visa? Thanks.
Okay, so I'm looking to sponsor current employees on PSW and a recent graduate. Should I apply for two cause? So should I apply for two cause? It sounds like it. I mean, if you apply for two cause and don't use them, it's not really. I don't think it really matters. I wouldn't do it deliberately, but I think if you would just say, look, we need two cause for these two people. If then one doesn't work out, who cares, kind of thing. Also, will it be more beneficial for the business to sponsor the new graduate as a new entrant, or for them to apply for their PSW visa? So I think what you're saying is you've got an option. You either sponsor them or they go into the graduate route. There's pros and cons. In a way, it's certainly on the face of it cheaper if they just go on the graduate route, what you're calling the PSW. It's no longer called that. It's called the graduate route, because you don't have to pay the fees to sponsor them. So some saving there. But if they're switching from the student visa, you don't have to pay the skills charge anyway. So there's a sort of business argument that you might want them tied into your business through sponsorship, because if they're on a graduate route visa, they can just come and go really as they want. Whereas if they're on a skilled worker sponsorship, they can only work for you. So I would say that kind of comes down to a business decision. But if they're on the student visa, you don't pay the skills charge. So I'd say there's a stronger argument to sponsor them, especially if they're on a student visa. I think is that all the questions?
It looks like that's it, yes. Thanks everybody for your questions.
Okay, yeah, thank you for sticking through. I hope it wasn't too dry. It kind of felt like a bit of a dry subject, but hopefully there's some useful information that you can take away from that. And yeah, we've got these other good webinars coming up that Chris has already mentioned. So these are, I'd say the one on the 14th of November, Mastering the SMS, the Sponsor Management System. That is with Frances. She'll be getting into the nitty-gritty of how to navigate this strange sponsor management system. So that could be really helpful if you're a bit bamboozled by the SMS, like many people are. But then also we've got the employment team jumping in and doing some really interesting talks around the kind of HR employment side. So yeah, do come along to those as well.
Yes, please do sign up. Thank you for attending this webinar. And I do also want to let you know that we will be sending out an email after this webinar with a link to a recording and the slides from the webinar as well. If you have any further questions, please do get in touch with us via the website, truthlegal.com. You can also get in touch with me at marketing@truthlegal.com. And all those details will be in the follow-up email as well. So we're here to help. So if you need any further support, please do get in touch. And again, thank you very much for attending today.